that weekend was a big one, obviously, with everything going on with Ronda Rousey. But for our next guest, it was also a very big weekend. He was in Singapore to, at least he thought, defend his one welterweight title against Luis Santos, but that never happened. A bizarre situation for Ben Askren, and he joins us now via the magic of Skype. There he is, Funky himself. Ben, how are you?
I'm doing great, Ariel. You know what? When I was just listening to you talking, I want to know, what did Edmund say on the other half of the thing where they cut him off?
That is a good point. I think actually, if you go on UFC Fight Pass, you can listen to the corner in its entirety. But I know everyone who's criticizing him did not do that, and I just think look,
Yeah,
like I said, I think you can actually criticize him for a lot, but not that because they cut him in the middle, and you could tell that he's
yeah,
sort of rounding the corner. By the way, while we're on the topic, and I want to talk to you about you, obviously, but you said on Twitter
yeah,
that you don't think Ronda will be back after seeing that clip on TMZ, like that she was a shattered
yeah.
fighter. Can you expand on that?
Well, I think it was. I think a lot. She bought into her own hype so much that this was just so devastating. It's gonna be hard to come back from. One of my favorite topics to read about my whole life has just been famous athletes, and a lot of those have been combat athletes. And sometimes when you buy into your own hype that much, and a bubble gets bursted, it's hard to come back from. And that clip on TMZ, I want to say that was 5 days after the fight. And by that point, a well-rounded, mature adult would have said, "Listen, I got my ass kicked. It happens, but I'm gonna be back. This isn't the end for me. Listen, people lose. That happens. It's acceptable. But I'm coming back, and I'm gonna get my title." But she was still so distraught over what had happened. It's gonna take her a long time. It's really gonna. I think it's gonna take her a long time, if ever. I mean, maybe she's gonna say, "Hey, I'm making enough money in the movies. This fighting thing, it's hard, right?
Hmm.
It's tough. I'm gonna go do that. It's easier."
So with that in mind, if she does come back, would you say it's a mistake to come back against Holly? Does she need one or two fights to get back on track?
Um, I think it depends on the athlete, but with Ronda, the way she reacted, I would say 100%. I would say you got to put her against a few people that she can beat up pretty easy,
Uh-huh.
and then see what happens. But yeah, Holly, man, because Holly beat her everywhere. I mean, Holly really had a great game plan. She executed, which for us that know fighting, it was tough to predict because Holly didn't look that great in all of her other fights. Whether it was in her early fights or whether in UFC fights, she didn't look that great, and then she just looked freaking amazing a couple weeks ago.
And who knows if she was really, holding her cards close to her vest, as Mike Winklejohn alluded to. But yeah, she rose to the occasion and then some. It was a masterful performance. It was one of the very best we've ever seen from a challenger in a title fight. But I want to talk to you about your situation. You've been
Yeah.
competing for a long time. You've been around sports for a long time. You've competed at the highest level. Have you ever been around a more bizarre situation as the one you experienced a couple of weeks ago in Singapore?
Yeah, you know what? And I talked to a bunch of people, and I don't think so. I really don't think so. And I do, Ariel. I come from the wrestling world where if you miss weight by like 0.2 pounds, it's a big deal, right? Like people don't come. If someone on my college team were to have showed up to a match 4.5 pounds over, Coach Smith probably would have just kicked him off the team. He would have been like, "You're just done. Just turn in your stuff, go home, go do college. This isn't for you." So that kind of stuff doesn't happen in my world. And then after that, every single thing was just like it seemed like he was trying to do everything he could not to fight. I mean, it was just a ridiculous set of circumstances.
Okay, so for those who may have missed it because they were consumed by, Ronda
Yeah,
Mania, give
yeah,
us the shorthand version. I know you went on Facebook
yeah.
and kind of broke it all down, and you did a very nice job of doing that. He has since refuted some of your claims, and we can get into that in a second here. But what happened from your perspective?
Yeah, the short version of it, and that's all you really need is the short version of it is he showed up overweight. I said give him as much time as he needed.
How many pounds
He didn't
overweight?
make four and a half at the beginning.
Okay.
Um, he doesn't make weight. He said as much time. I think he got down to like 2.2 over. I said okay. I talked to his coaches. I said all right, that's fine, but we'll do a second weigh in. We'll both weigh in at 185 tomorrow. They say that's fair. They shake hands. I leave to go to media, and then they say no, he can't do that anymore. So I say all right, fine, 20 pounds. 20 pounds, that's reasonable, right? I
Right.
thought. So then the next morning, he's eating breakfast. My buddy that's my corner is texting me like, "This dude's down here eating breakfast. Like, what the heck?" Then he's eating breakfast for 90 minutes. Then he tries to go to the hospital without someone from the ONE FC crew with him. So I like saw them going to the hospital. I'm like, what? No, someone's got to go with you. So then he kept asking for IVs, and the doctor said, listen, you're fine. Your liver function's fine. Your kidney function's fine. They literally tested his blood to make sure everything was fine. And, and then, so then he was still 3 pounds over the 190. He was 193, and he refused to even attempt to get down. And it's just like, do you not want to fight? What's your deal? And at that point, I'm just like, this guy is just so beyond ridiculous. It's not even funny.
Mm.
So I didn't feel like budging at that point because he was just being an idiot.
What's it like for you to travel all the way from the U.S., from Milwaukee to Singapore? You're getting ready, mentally ready. You've been doing a training camp. You're trying to avenge this bizarre fight that happened a few months ago in April. I mean, like you're in the zone, and then you don't get that release, and you have to fly all the way back home without ever fighting. How do you process that?
And that was kind of the same thing that happened last time. Is there really wasn't a conclusion to the fight, and that's hard because prior to that, I actually was talking to my corners. I'd kind of got lucky. Prior to that, I'm gonna show up every time for work. I'm gonna make weight. I'm gonna do what I have to do. But I'd never had someone pull out of a fight or miss weight or anything like that before. So I've been pretty lucky in my career up to this point. So I never experienced these things, which they happen all the time. I mean, it's not uncommon in the fighting world. The fighting world's kind of the wild, wild west to me. But yeah, it was kind of like very inconclusive, very a dead end. You like that feeling of winning. You like that feeling of doing all the work and getting in there and get to beat somebody up, and get your hand raised in front of everybody. You like that feeling, and I didn't get that feeling. So it's disappointing. I've been talking to one that they're going to try to get me back in real short order. They had a card in November 20 whatever in Beijing, and they got 2 more in December. That are filled up, but the thing in January, February. So hopefully I'll pop back in there real quick and get a fight.
Has the ship sailed on Sapo Santos? Is that no longer in the cards for you?
I would say. I mean, I couldn't understand how one would want to keep him around after all the shenanigans. He can refute all he wants, but we were all there. In Asia, all the hotels serve free breakfast to everybody. It's real nice and stuff. Everyone from all the other fighters, everybody's sitting there watching this knucklehead eat breakfast for 90 minutes, drinking juice. I mean, I personally saw him drink 5 glasses of juice. And then right? And then he's 3 pounds over and he's like, I'm not even gonna try. Like, bro, we just saw you eat breakfast for 90 minutes. Like, were you trying to be over 190? Like, what's the deal here? So I mean, after everything, I would have I believe they'd have a hard time bringing him back. But we'll see what happens.
He sent a statement to us. He did an interview with MMA Junkie. I mean, saying that you're the one who, he flew all the way from Brazil, and you're the one who didn't want to fight him. I mean, did you read that stuff, and how do you react to that?
Yeah, I mean, literally, I think I read the first one that came up, which I believe was MMA fighting, and it was like so convoluted and so stupid that I didn't even feel the need to respond. I just read it like, well, no one's gonna believe this. And you know what, Errol? Usually, like, I'm kind of a polarizing figure, so no matter what happens with me, if I read through comments of an article, it's usually 50-50.
Yeah.
Some people like me, some people don't like me. But when I read through articles of his story, it was like 98% were for me and 2 were for him. They were just like, "What's wrong with this idiot? Ben showed up and made weight. It's not my problem. I showed up and I made weight. I showed up to work, and we signed a contract, and I fulfilled my obligation, and he was the one who didn't. So I didn't really even feel the need to respond because it was just so ridiculous."
Okay, so I know that this next question can be sort of viewed as unfair to one, and I admit that.
Sure.
But let me ask you anyway. At any point did you think to yourself, this is what happens when you're not fighting for the major organizations? Like, this wouldn't happen. And I know weird things happen. We just saw with Tyron Woodley and Johnny Hendricks. I'm sure you were following that situation.
Or Tyron Woodley and Kevin Gastelum. He said Tyron's been really unlucky and had 2 this year.
That's right. But did you ever think that, like, gosh, I need to get out of this situation? Did you ever think that?
Like I said, I think I was lucky up to this point that I've never had anyone pull out of a fight or never had anyone miss weight in my career, which it happens in MMA. MMA is a wild place, and it happens. So I think I've been lucky up to this point. And so, no, I didn't really have that feeling. I mean, honestly, I was happy with one because they said, all right, he missed weight. What do you want to do? And I said, well, I think he should have to weigh in again tomorrow. And they said, all right, that's fair. We support that. And after he was done being ridiculous, they never tried to force me to take the fight past my stipulations, which I've heard in many cases the UFC does to their fighters, because it hurts one to not have a main event, right? It definitely hurts them, for sure. And so it wasn't a good situation for anybody. And at no point did they make me feel like I did something wrong because I showed up and I was on weight. So um, no, I didn't have that feeling at all.
They are operating under different rules. They're in a different, part of the world,
Yeah.
and it's hard sometimes to, for I think the casual MMA fan, North American fan, to keep up with it just because the events are on, very early in the morning here, etc. And then when you add to it that it was happening the same weekend as a Ronda Rousey fight, the biggest fight in UFC history as far as attendance is concerned. I mean, this one flew under the radar. I think that if it was any other weekend, especially one without a UFC event, it would have been a bigger controversy, a bigger deal. So I want to ask you, being there, because I know you did a lot of media, you were with Rich Franklin,
Yeah.
and you're the champion. How big is one in Asia? Tell us the real deal. I know you're always honest with
Yeah.
us, not the promoter speak. Is it?
Honest. I'm not,
Yeah, well,
honest as it gets, Ariel. I'm gonna shoot you straight. Um, they did have a little trouble this year. They had a deal in China that kind of didn't go exactly as they planned, and so they wanted to do more events. But they're kind of back on track. They did 2 events in November, two in December, and they're looking to do 2 a month all next year, every single month. Um, but Singapore, it was packed. I mean, every single seat. I had Dustin Ortiz, who fights in UFC. He was with me. Your good old pal Front Row Brian was with me. They can attest, from the opening bell of the first fight, which is very different than American MMA. People show up for the first fight. It's really bizarre. Um, I mean, not a seat in the house was open in Singapore, so it's a big deal. And one advantage they have is people ask me if America's nationalistic, and I don't think it is because there's so many American fighters that America doesn't get excited about American fighter, right? Because a lot of us are, but over there, I mean, these people go nuts over a Singaporean fighter or a Malaysian fighter or a Philippine fighter. When I was in the Philippines in April, I mean, you would be shocked, And these guys they're 2-1. They're guys who are starting their careers, but the whole freaking country gets behind him. So yeah, 100%, it's a big deal. And I know one does that. Their business plan is not to market towards North America because it's already so saturated between UFC, Bellator, World Series of Fighting, and all the other organizations. It's very saturated. Um, but there's 4 billion people over there in Asia, and they know if they can make a dent in that market between China and Japan and Korea and Southeast Asia and India, they're going to have a very big business. And I tend to agree with them.
I've thought about your story a lot, and last year it was such a bizarre one because, I mean, really one of the weirder ones of the past year because here we have a champion free agent and, the whole thing with the UFC. I mean, just so strange, and we covered it at length. But I've thought about
Yeah,
you a lot recently with the new Bellator. Forget about what you could be doing in the UFC because I think that's pretty clear. But with the new
yeah, it
Bellator,
should.
I wonder, like, what would Scott Coker do with Ben Askren? And more
Yeah,
importantly, what does Ben Askren think when he watches these big tentpole events? Like, I could be treated
yeah.
coming down here. Do you ever think like that? Like, man, if I just stuck around for a year, if things worked out differently, it would be totally different for me in the States. I wouldn't have to travel so far away to fight.
Well, they take care of me over at one, so I'm definitely happy there. And my whole life, I've tried to make a habit of never looking back because when you look back at the decisions you could have made or things you could have done, you end up being unhappy because the thing is you can't change them. I am where I am right now, and I can move forward, but I can't move backwards. Right? I can't
Right.
change time. I'm a fan of what Scott Coker's doing. I think he's realized that he can't fight the UFC heads up. They can't go fighter for fighter with him. But what he can do is try to build these kind of bizarro fights, which you hit Kimbo on today. That's what Kimbo sucks. He's a bum, but he gets ratings.
I'll tell him you
Uh,
said that.
it's fine. You could tell him. I'd beat him up, no problem. I mean, come on. You know he's a bum, Ariel. Don't lie about it.
Well, whatever he may be, he's their biggest ratings getter. So,
Yeah.
right?
So Scott knows if he gets these ratings, he gets dollars. If he gets dollars, he can sign more fighters. If he signs better fighters, he gets better ratings. And I think his end game is obviously not to do these freak show ish fights, but he realizes that's where he's at right now, and that's what he's got to do. And I think it's a really smart strategy. And I'm curious to see how it all plays out over the next couple of years.
Would you be okay with retiring as a one fighter, or do you still long for that UFC shot?
No, I would be okay. I've come to terms with that for sure. And not the fact that I would have the three letters UFC behind my name, but the fact that everyone would know that I'm the best fighter in the world. That's kind of what I gave up is the ability to totally prove that in everyone else's mind. And in my mind, I know where I stand, and so I'm comfortable with that. But in my mind, that's what I gave up was the ability to totally prove that I'm the best welterweight in the world. But everything else being said, I'm happy. Everything's good. and I'm going to keep stepping in the cage and beating up whoever shows up. And so who knows? Maybe things will get funny in the next couple of years, and one will sign a couple really big names. I'll get to beat him up, and everyone will know I'm the best in the world.
So their title is on the line January 2nd. It's Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit. Love to hear your opinion on this. Who do you think wins and why?
Yeah, and I've had my hands on both of these guys, Ariel, and I know how I stand against them. So
You've
we
trained with
don't have to
both
go
of
there,
them?
no.
You've trained with both?
Not for at length, but I have worked out with both of them at some point in the past.
Okay.
I think Carlos, actually. You know what? Because I think Carlos has great cardio, great endurance. I think Carlos's weakest point is the wrestling. He gets taken down very easy, but I don't think Robbie's going to do that or do it often. Um, and I don't think Robbie's got enough in the tank left to knock Carlos out. And if it goes the distance, Carlos is just going to keep picking up the volume and picking up the volume and picking up the volume. And I see him kind of wearing Robbie out. Maybe TKO finish or something later in the fight. That's how I would predict it going.
Interesting. All right. Before I
Carlos
let you
is
go,
dangerous. He's tricky. I mean, he's got a lot of weapons
right.
that he likes to use.
So Sapo isn't next for you, and you say you want to return, first quarter of the year. Who's out there that you're thinking? I mean, I don't want you to necessarily call anyone out. You're the champ, but who comes to mind?
They got a couple of these Russian fighters. They're signing a lot of these Russian fighters that are really tough. They just had a guy who won their flyweight belt in Beijing last week, and he's Uzbekistani, and I think he's 25-0 or something. So, and if you're kind of paying attention, the Soviet Union and the former Soviet Union countries are just blowing up with fighters, whether it's the UFC or Bellator or ONE FC. And so I know they've signed a few guys. They have a big records, but maybe not big names from those countries. So I would guess one of those guys.
Any final words for Mr. Santos?
He's a bum. He's like either so delusional or so stupid that nothing I'm going to say is going to affect him.
Oh, I was hoping to get like an Askren promo here. Are you cutting a promo on him? Not even one Jabroni reference?
I don't need to cut I told you I don't need to cut a promo on him. He's a bum.
All right.
Hey, Ariel, you know what? I almost used this today. I got a microphone. I started a podcast. It's amateur wrestling. We did our first one last week. We were filming our taping our second one tonight. What do you got for me? Come on, give me some advice, man, because you're the superstar.
Well, it's hard to give you advice without hearing it, but I would love to hear it, and then I can give you advice. But just be yourself. People love people. You mentioned it right. In the middle of the interview. You're a straight shooter, so I don't think I need to tell you to remain that way. But if you can tell it like it is and not show any bias, if you think that Anthony Pettis is going to lose to Eddie Alvarez, please tell us that, because that will make for very interesting.
I don't.
I know. That just comes.
You trying to get that out of me?
No. But be a straight shooter.
What do you got?
I need some time to think about it.
That's right up in your neighborhood. That's what? It's in Boston.
Boston, yeah. Will you be there?
I'm not coming. Actually, Anthony hired Israel Martinez to be his wrestling coach because he asked me to work 3 times a week with him, and I'm just too busy with my own fighting and other projects to be able to do that. So he wanted to get more one-on-ones, and I just wasn't really able to provide him with that. So
yeah, I noticed that.
But I'm excited to see him back.
So you're done with Anthony?
We're in the same gym and stuff, but as far as wrestling coach, no.
That's interesting. Anyone else? Sergio as well, right?
Sergio's. I don't think he's got a fight coming up. He won a couple months ago.
Yeah, but I did see him with. I thought I saw him with Izzy, or maybe I'm thinking Anthony as well.
Yeah, I don't know if he's his wrestling coach, but he was just. I think he was just. They were the same place, same time in Australia or something.
How do you feel about Izzy?
I've known Israel since we were, I think, 11 or 12 years old. I mean, way back. And we both run wrestling clubs, and so I see him a lot, know him a lot. We get along really well. And everything points to he does a great job coaching MMA fighters. If you look at the roster of guys he's coached, although I did win a bet because he told me Cerrone was going to beat up Pettis, and I bet him on that one. And I just knew Anthony was a little quicker, a little faster. So I did beat him on that bet. But Israel's a good coach.
All right, Ben, appreciate the time. Thank you very much for clearing it all up for us. Always great to catch up, and looking forward to your next fight.
All right. Thanks, Ariel.
There he is, Ben Askren, also joining the podcast movement. Always a straight shooter. A bizarre situation. And like I said, I definitely think that it would have received more attention. Promotions, and I know these are built out long in advance, but promotions need to stay away from particular fighters. Ronda Rousey, Conor McGregor, of course, John Jones when he returns. That's just in your best interest. And even if it's not happening at the exact same time, and I know, like I said, they play under different rules. I mean, they're not necessarily looking for the coverage from North American media, and they don't necessarily want North American fans. That's not their end goal. You would get a lot more attention, especially in the MMA community, which is big but also very small because we pay attention to everything. Like, there's a reason why when I go to Australia, and those fans are just so darn nice and polite, and just such a pleasure to meet with. There's a reason why people know who we are when we go to Australia. If I was covering the Yankees and they played an exhibition game in Australia, no one would know who those reporters were. But it's so in a way it's big, but it's also very small. I will say though that crowd in Australia was definitely a unique one. I don't know if they were just. I think it was a mix of it being early in the morning, which they're typically used to, but also at the Sky Dome in Toronto. It was called the Rogers Center when they had UFC 129, but we all call it the Sky Dome. At the Sky Dome, that was a baseball stadium, and the configuration of a baseball stadium is a lot different than the AFL, the Australian Rules Football League, and whatever else they use that Etihad Stadium for. So the stands were a lot further away from the cage. They had to put approximately 13,500 floor seats, which really spread things out. So I had the opportunity to be in the stands and watch the action for a couple of minutes, and you just felt very far away from it all. And I think that led to a very quiet crowd. And the Australian fighters, some of them didn't do so well early on, so maybe that got people down. They certainly were awake when Holly Holm won, but I think that's why it sounded so quiet. They were just really far away. And that's, in the past, the reason why Dana White has said that he doesn't like doing those big stadium shows. I think a baseball one is a little different than one like that.